So it seems like every year I get an email from somebody with a list of what they call church bloopers. These are real announcements that are made at churches, and they're just not that well thought out. So I'm going to share a couple of them with you. The first one is, ladies, don't forget the CWF rummage sale. It's a chance to get rid of those things not worth keeping around the house. Bring your husbands. For those of you who have children and don't know it, we have a nursery downstairs. Next Thursday, there will be tryouts for the choir. They need all the help they can get. At the evening service tonight, the sermon will be, What is Hell? Come early and listen to our choir practice. This evening at 7 o'clock, there will be a hymn sing in the park across from the church. Bring a blanket and come prepared to sin. They left off the G. The low self-esteem support group will meet Thursday at 7 p.m. Please use the back door. Weight Watchers will meet at 7 p.m. at First Pres. Please use the large double door at the side entrance. Those are legitimate announcements that are made at the church. Well, this Lenten season, we are looking at a series of parables found in the Gospel of Luke. And there's a lot of parables in Luke, so we're not getting to all of them. But 2 weeks ago, we started with the Good Samaritan. Last Sunday, we looked at the parable of the rich fool, and today we come to the parable of the prodigal son. British biblical scholar C.H. Dodd once said that the precise application of a parable should tease our mind into active thought, which means that we should revisit and keep thinking about these parables that Jesus told throughout our lives. Because the truth of the matter is, these parables will speak to us differently in the different stages of life that we are in, depending on what's going on in our lives, what we're dealing with, what we're struggling with, what we're facing. And so when we come back to these familiar parables that many of us have known since our childhood, what we will find is that Christ speaks to us in new and profound ways. Now, there's a story told about a Sunday school teacher who was doing like what Madison did this morning, and she was telling her class about the parable of the prodigal son. And she wanted to emphasize the resentful attitude of the elder brother. And so after describing the rejoicing and the celebration in the household over the return of the younger son, she raised a question to the children about the elder brother. Can anybody in the class tell me who in the midst of all the festivities failed to share in the jubilant spirit of the occasion? And one little girl slowly raised her hand and she said, was it the fatted calf? You got to love the honesty of children and the innocence of children. Luke tells us that a man had two sons. The younger one comes to him and asks for his share of the inheritance early. And then he goes and he squanders it in a foreign country, living a life of debauchery and immorality. The Bible doesn't go into much detail, as my men's group pointed out, as to what exactly that was, so use your imagination. The older son stayed at home, and he remained faithful to his father by working very hard on the family land. Well, one day, when the younger son runs out of money, he finds himself with no job, feeding the pigs, which was below that of a servant. It dawns on him, even the servants in my father's house are taken care of better than this. So the prodigal returns home, not quite sure how he will be responded or welcomed or unwelcomed by his father and by his family. And much to his surprise, his father rushes out with open arms, forgives him, puts a robe on him, puts a ring on his finger, and throws a big party to celebrate his return. Now, the older son is out in the field. He's working faithfully, and he hears what's going on. And he finds out that the younger son has come home, and there's a big party being thrown. The fatted calf has been killed, which apparently was a really big deal back in that day. And so he comes back, and the father rushes out and pleads with him to come inside. But he says, no. For all these years, I've been working like a slave for you, and I've never disobeyed your command. But you've never thrown me a party like this. But when this son of yours, who has devoured all of your property, has spent all of his inheritance, when he's been with prostitutes and living a horrible life, when he comes back, You throw a party and you kill the fatted calf. I just don't understand. The father says to him, son, you're always with me, and everything that I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead and he's come back to life. He was lost, but now he's been found. There's a great book that was written years ago by Henry Nouwen on this parable called The Return of the Prodigal. And if you recall, Nouwen is a spiritual author and priest who taught at Harvard. He taught at Yale. He also worked in a disability place called La Arche. But at one point in his life, he became completely mesmerized by a painting that was done by Rembrandt that hangs in the Heritage or the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg. And Nouwen went to the museum and he spent days upon days looking at this parable, this picture of the parable. And he became convinced that the parable of the prodigal son is absolutely full of spiritual insight. Today I want us to think about this parable. I want us to think about the three characters that are represented in this parable: the prodigal, the elder brother, and the father. And I want us to think about first the people that are represented by these characters, but also, just as importantly, the different versions of ourselves that are represented by this parable. So first of all, you have the prodigal, the one who asks for his inheritance early, and then he goes and he blows all of his wealth in a foreign land. I think the prodigal could represent anybody in our world who never has to work for anything, who has everything given to them. These are the people who feel entitled. They feel like the rules don't apply to them. They always think that they are the exception to the rule. Nouwen says the prodigal son's decision to leave is a heartless rejection of the home in which he was born and nurtured, and a break from the community and tradition of which he was a part. When Luke says that he left for a distant country, he's talking about a drastic cutting loose from the way of living, thinking, and acting that's been handed down to him over the generations. And more than disrespect, it's a betrayal of the family legacy and the family values that have been passed down. And this was unprecedented in biblical times, to ask for your inheritance early and to leave and to say, I'm out of here. I think the prodigal represents anybody who makes a conscious decision in life to turn away from God, to turn away from faith, out of selfish ambition and the belief that there is something bigger and better out there, the belief that there is something other than God that can fulfill that deep spiritual desire that you have deep within your soul. He also represents anybody who tries to intentionally distance themselves from their family or their past because they are selfish and delusional in thinking that life is always going to be better somewhere else. But have you ever heard that phrase before? Wherever you go, there you are. And sometimes when you leave one situation and you flee for another one, what you find is that your problems and your struggles follow you, because wherever you go, there you are. Usually a decision like this comes from anger and resentment and jealousy and revenge and lust and greed and lots of other unhealthy factors. And usually the decision causes a lot of pain and a lot of hurt for the people who are left behind. The prodigal could represent any of us when we get to a point in life when we feel like we've had it. We've had it with our marriage. We've had it with our families. We've had it with raising children. I got close yesterday, right? We've had it with all the headaches and all the problems that seem to come with life. And then we think, if only we just leave and move away, that we'll find a better place and we'll find a better situation. But it's usually not the case. There are times in life when people need to leave. There are situations of physical abuse and neglect when people need to get out for their own sake. But most of the time, what we find when we run is that we can't escape our problems. And our problems will follow us, and then we're just dealing with them in a new context. Secondly, let's think about the elder son. He's the one who gets so angry and livid and jealous when his father throws a party for the prodigal who's come home. Who does this represent? It's important that we understand the context of Jesus telling this parable. Jesus is telling this parable, and he is responding to the ongoing criticism of the Pharisees and the religious leaders that he's welcoming and associating with sinners and outcasts. So the elder son in that day could represent the Pharisees, the religious leaders. But in our day, I think the elder son could be anybody who is overly pious and judgmental. Anybody who thinks that they are righteous and perfect, without fault or flaw. In today's world, I would say the elder son represents the Christians who think that their version of Christianity is better than everybody else's, or their church is better than all the other churches. Just as the younger son becomes lost in a distant country, you could easily say that the elder son is lost at home. Henry Nouwen says his lostness is characterized by judgment and condemnation, anger and resentment, bitterness and jealousy, all of which is so pernicious and so damaging to the human heart. He is a proud, unkind, and selfish person who has hidden his feelings for far too long, and then all of a sudden they come bursting out when his brother returns and a party is thrown. And if we're honest, many of us live our lives like this. We're good people. We do what's expected of us. We plug away and we work hard. But we whine and we grumble and we complain about everything along the way. We suppress our feelings, and then when somebody else is blessed, or when somebody else receives a promotion, or when somebody else gets something that we don't, we can't be happy for them because we are so full of malice and envy. The older brother represents the people who never seem to be able to experience joy in life. Do you ever get in a situation where you feel like, I just can't experience joy right now? And oftentimes it's because we think that everybody else has it better off. Nobody has the problems that I have. Nobody has the struggles that I have. The older brother is indicative of people that are blind to their blessings because they're so focused on what they don't have. The older brother reminds us that greed and jealousy is probably the number one joy killer in a materialistic world. And he doesn't understand why his father would welcome his brother after everything his brother has done. Then let's think about the father. I've heard it said by many biblical commentators and scholars that this should not be called the parable of the prodigal son. This perhaps should be called the parable of the loving father, because really the father is the hero in this parable. The father in this parable can represent God, and he cares for both of his sons, the one who is left with the inheritance and the one who stayed behind and remained loyal. But he's willing to forgive the sins of the past and welcome his son back with open arms. He's willing to look past the fact that at one point the son wanted nothing to do with him, yet he forgives him out of love and compassion. You see, the God that we serve as Christians is like this. He's the God of unconditional love. He's the God that gives us a second chance, and a third chance, and a fourth chance, and as many chances as we might need. And we should be thankful for that, because we all mess up. He's the God of the lost, the God of the faithful, the God of the resentful and the God of the loving, the God of the angry and the God of the merciful, the God of the jealous and the God of the selfless, the God of those who love him in return and the God of those who turn away from him. There's so many lessons found in the parable of the prodigal son. The grass is not always greener. You can't run away from your family. You can't run away from your problems in life. Don't overlook your blessings. Don't be filled with jealousy. Learn to forgive. Redemption is possible. But most of all, remember that we serve a God who always has his arms open, no matter how many times we've run away or how many times we've strayed. God will welcome us back in, and God loves us for who we are, our faults, our flaws, our shortcomings, and all. But there's something else that this parable causes me to reflect upon, and it's family dynamics. Or as I've titled it in the sermon this morning, family drama. Any of you have family drama? You've heard me say before many times that there is no such thing as a normal family. Every family is unique. Every family has its baggage. Every family has its issues. Every family has its dysfunction. Usually these things are built around unmet expectations and disappointment, but this parable is a biblical example of family drama and family dysfunction. Every family has rivalry and jealousy and tension. Every family has unique dynamics that create drama and tension and heartache. And if you think that your family is the only one that has that, I'm here to tell you this morning that you're not. Look to your left, look to your right, look behind you, look in front of you. Every family is dealing with their own tension and their own drama and their own dynamics. But what can we learn from the parable? Not only about how we live in our family situations, but also about how we relate to our faith. I'll leave you with 3 quick thoughts for you to keep thinking about. The first lesson is you can't run away from your problems, like I've said. You shouldn't run away from your family. We don't know exactly why the younger son asked for his inheritance. We don't know what was going on, why he wanted to leave, why he thought life would be better. But he made a mistake. He left what was a pretty good situation. And I think that human beings, from my observation, are masters at being restless. And we think that there's a better life somewhere else. We're going to be happier if only we can just go somewhere else. I see this with churches all the time. People come to the church, they get involved in the church, all of a sudden they're gone. Where'd you go to church? Oh, blank, blank. Okay, well, I hope you're happy. A few years later, they left that church. They go to the next church. Human beings are restless creatures, and sometimes we have to understand that we can't run from everything. We have to face it. We have to live in it. Remember that saying, wherever you go, there you are. A second lesson is that we have to understand that envy and jealousy and resentment is very dangerous, it's very toxic, and we need to know exactly what it does to our souls. The older brother in this parable was full of anger and envy and jealousy and resentment, and it was eating at him. He couldn't let it go. Somebody once said that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and then expecting somebody else to die. And so many times in life when we don't forgive and when we don't let something go, we're the ones that are suffering. And going through life with the mindset of the elder brother is no way to live because life is too short. Pay attention to the condition of your heart. And if there's something that's wrong and there's something that's eating at you, only you can address it. Lastly, from the Father, we learn the importance of redemption and forgiveness and unconditional love. If we believe that the Father represents God in this parable, then we are reminded we serve a God of new beginnings. A God who has his arms open wide and is ready to receive us no matter what has happened in our lives. And I've always believed that Christians are really, really, really good at talking about forgiveness, but Christians are really, really, really bad at actually forgiving. In this parable, the father practiced it. He was so happy that his son was alive and had come back home. And that's all that he could focus on. He didn't want to hold on to the past because the past holds us captive. And we cannot live in the past. We worship a God who forgives and who redeems. And God calls us to do the same thing for each other. In our marriages, in our families, in our friendships, in our churches. May we never forget that. May that always challenge us and inspire us. Amen.